My name is Kate. I am 22 years old. I live in a small room in the city. It is not a nice room, but it is all I can pay for. The walls are gray and old. The window is small. I can see only other buildings from there. Every morning I hear cars and people outside. I came here 2 years ago. I wanted a better life. I grew up in a small town far from here. My father worked in a factory. My mother cleaned houses. We did not have much money. When I was a child, I always wanted to live in the city. I thought the city was full of smart people and rich people. I wanted to be like them. I wanted to wear nice clothes, eat in good places, and walk with confidence. I wanted to be seen. When I finished school, I worked for a year in a small shop in my town. I saved some money and came to the city. I thought life here would be easy, but it was not. I could not find a good job. I did not have a degree. I had only a high school certificate. Many people asked for more. For the first months, I worked in a cafe. The job was hard. I stood all day and smiled at people. My boss shouted often. The customers were rich. I looked at them and felt small. They wore clean clothes, nice shoes, and spoke softly. They paid for 1 cup of coffee what I earned in 2 hours. I tried to copy how they spoke and moved. I wanted to be like them. One day, a young man came to the cafe. He looked different from other customers. He was quiet and polite. He always read a book when he sat down. He smiled when I brought his drink. His name was Henry. I saw his name on the cup when he ordered online. After some weeks, he started to talk to me. He asked my name. I said, "I'm Kate." He said he worked in an office near the cafe. He was kind and calm. I liked to talk with him. He never looked at me the way other rich men did. One morning he came again and asked, "Do you study?" I said no. He said, "You should. You are smart." I smiled, but I felt shy. Nobody had said that to me before. After that day, I thought a lot. I wanted to study. I wanted to change my life. But school in the city was expensive. I could not pay for it. I looked online for scholarships. I sent applications, but nobody answered. I still worked in the cafe. I still watched people come and go. Months passed. Henry kept coming. One day he said, "My office needs a new helper. Would you like to try?" My heart jumped. I said yes. The next week I went for the interview. His boss asked many questions. I did not know all the answers, but I spoke clearly. I tried to look calm. 2 days later, I got a message. I got the job. I left the cafe. My pay at the new job was better. I worked as an assistant. I sent emails, answered calls, and kept files in order. It was a small office, but it looked clean and modern. The people there wore good clothes. They spoke English better than me. I wanted to sound like them. Every night I practiced. Henry worked in another part of the office. He helped me when I made mistakes. He was patient and never laughed at me. I started to like him more. But I also saw the people around him. The girls from rich families smiled at him. They wore perfume and spoke about trips and parties. I listened quietly and felt poor again. One Friday evening, there was a small office party. Everyone wore formal clothes. I had only one simple black dress. It was clean, but not fancy. When I entered the room, I saw Henry talking with a girl named Claire. She worked in the design team. Her dress was bright and beautiful. She looked perfect. They laughed together. I stood near the table and drank juice. Nobody spoke to me for a while. I felt out of place. Then Henry saw me and walked over. He smiled and said, "You look nice tonight." I smiled back and said, "Thank you." We talked for a few minutes, but soon his boss called him away. I watched him walk back to Claire. That night when I came home, I looked at myself in the mirror. My dress looked plain. My hair was not soft like the girls at work. My hands were dry from years of cleaning and serving. I sat on my bed and thought, maybe I can never be like them. But then another voice in my mind said, I must try harder. The next day I went to a second-hand store and bought a few shirts and shoes. They were not new, but they looked nice. I started watching videos to learn better English. I listened to how rich people spoke. I copied their words and tone. I wanted to change my life completely. After some weeks, I began to feel more confident. People at work started to notice me. Even the manager said, "You are improving, Kate." Smiled and thanked him. Henry also smiled more often at me. Sometimes we had lunch together in the small park near the office. I liked those moments. But soon, I learned something that made my heart heavy. One afternoon, I saw Claire and Henry leave the office together. They got into his car and drove away. I stood near the door and watched. They looked happy. That night, I could not sleep. My thoughts were full of him. I knew he was not my boyfriend. He was free to do what he wanted. But it hurt. The next morning, I went to work early. I wanted to focus on my job, not on him. I worked hard that day. I wanted people to see me as serious, not weak. When Henry came in, he smiled at me like always. I smiled too, but my smile felt small. In the next months, my work improved. The manager asked me to help with bigger tasks. I wanted to show everyone that I was capable. I started to stay late at the office. I read reports and took notes. I wanted to grow. But with that, something also changed. I spoke less with Henry. He noticed it and asked one day, "Are you angry with me?" I said, "No, I'm just busy." He looked at me for a moment, then said softly, "You've changed." I said nothing. Inside, I knew he was right. I was becoming someone else, someone stronger, but also colder. One evening, after a long day, I walked out of the office and saw him waiting by the door. He said, "Can I give you a ride?" I said no, but he insisted. We sat in silence for most of the drive. Then he said, "You're doing well, Kate. Everyone sees it." I said, "Thank you." He smiled but looked sad. That night, when I reached home, I felt proud of myself. I was learning, growing, becoming better. But at the same time, I felt lonely. The city was big and bright, but my room was still small and dark. I looked out of the window. I saw tall buildings full of lights. I thought, one day I will live in one of those. I did not know then what it would cost me. Before I continue rest of the story, please like, subscribe, share, and tell me where you are listening from. Your support means a lot to me. Now let's continue. The next few months passed quickly. My days were long but full. I woke up early, worked all day, and came home tired. I ate simple food, read English stories online, and practiced writing. Every evening I told myself that I would not stay poor forever. I wanted to climb higher. At work, my manager started to trust me more. He gave me harder tasks. I had to send reports, talk with clients, and plan meetings. I made mistakes sometimes, but I always tried again. Slowly, people began to listen when I spoke. That gave me new confidence. But I also started to see the difference between me and others. The people in my office came from rich families. They had gone to private schools. They wore fine clothes and spoke without fear. They did not worry about money. They went to parties on weekends and traveled to other countries for holidays. I wanted that life too. One Friday evening, my manager told me there would be a charity event. He said everyone from our office must attend. It would be in a big hotel near the river. I said yes, even though I had nothing to wear. I spent my small savings on a new blue dress. It was the most expensive thing I ever bought. When the evening came, I took the train to the hotel. The lights were bright and the people looked beautiful. I walked in and felt small again. I saw Henry there, talking with some men. He looked handsome in his suit. When he saw me, he smiled and waved. I smiled back. A woman beside him looked at me from head to toe. I could see she was judging me. I turned away and went to get a drink. During dinner, I sat at a table with people from another department. They talked about their vacations, new phones, and cars. I said little. I didn't want to sound poor. When someone asked me where I lived, I said, near the park, because I didn't want to tell them I lived in a small room near the train tracks. Later that night, Henry came to my table. He asked if I wanted to dance. I said yes. We went to the dance floor. The music was slow. For a few minutes, I forgot where I was. He smiled and said, "You look beautiful tonight." My heart beat faster. I said, "Thank you." When the song ended, we walked outside to the balcony. The city lights shone on the water. He said softly, "You've changed a lot since the cafe." I said, "I had to. I want a better life." He looked at me for a long moment, then said, "You'll get it. I believe in you." His words warmed me. I wanted to believe him, but then he said, "I'm moving to another office next month. It's in London." My smile faded. I said, "Oh, that's great." He said, "I'll miss working with you." I didn't know what to say. I looked at the city lights again and said, "Good things always move away." He looked like he wanted to say something more, but someone called his name from inside. He smiled sadly and went back in. I stood there for a while and watched the river. I knew something was ending. When he left the company, everything felt different. The office felt quieter. I missed seeing him every day, but I did not let that stop me. I worked harder. I wanted to prove myself. The manager started trusting me with important projects. He said, "You can grow fast here if you keep working like this." I smiled and said, "I will." Weeks turned into months. I started to earn more money. I bought a small second-hand laptop so I could work from home. I also joined a short English course on weekends. My teacher said I spoke with a soft accent. That made me proud. But something else changed too. The more I worked, the more I felt alone. My old friends from the cafe stopped calling. They said I had changed. Maybe they were right. I didn't go out much anymore. I wanted to spend every hour improving myself. One evening, when I left work late, I saw a message on my phone. It was from Henry. He wrote, "I'm back in the city for a week. Can we meet?" My heart jumped. I stared at the screen for a long time, then typed, "Yes, of course." We met the next evening at a small restaurant near the river. When he walked in, he looked the same, calm, confident, kind. He said, "You look different, Kate. You look successful." I smiled. "Maybe a little," I said. We talked for a long time. He told me about London, his new job, and his life there. I told him about my work and how I was learning new things. At one point he said, "You always wanted to be part of this world, didn't you?" I said, "Yes." I wanted people to see me, to respect me. He said softly, "And now they do." I looked at him and said, "Not all of them." He smiled sadly and said, "You care too much about what they think." I didn't answer. When we left the restaurant, he offered to drive me home. I didn't want him to see where I lived, but I had no choice. When we reached my street, he looked out the window and said nothing. Then he said quietly, "You deserve better than this." I looked away and said, "I'm working on it." He smiled and said, "I know." After he left, I stood on the street and watched his car drive away. For a long time, I couldn't move. I knew he cared for me, but not enough. He lived in another world, a world I still wanted to enter. From that night, I decided I would not stop until I reached that world. I started saving money. I learned new skills. I worked on my speech and clothes. I wanted to look rich, sound rich, and live rich. I began to talk to people who could help me move up. Some were kind, some were not. I learned to smile even when I felt tired. One day, my manager told me about a new opening at a larger company. It was a chance for a higher position and better pay. I applied. I spent hours preparing for the interview. I bought a plain white shirt and pressed it carefully. When the day came, I spoke clearly and calmly. The next week they called me. I got the job. The new office was bigger and brighter. The people were more formal. I worked hard to fit in. My new boss, Mr. Allen, was a strict man. He liked people who were serious and quick. I made sure to never be late, never make excuses. He started to trust me. After a few months, he said, "You have talent. You should stay focused. Don't waste time on people who can't help you." His words stayed in my mind. I started to see the world differently. I stopped thinking about love. I thought about success, money, and power. I wanted to be someone who could walk into any room and be noticed. But sometimes, at night, I missed the girl who came to the city with hope and soft dreams. She wanted to be seen, but she also wanted to be loved. I was not sure she still lived inside me. One Sunday, I saw Henry again. He was sitting in a cafe near the park. I almost walked away, but he saw me and called my name. I sat down with him. He looked tired but happy. He said he was back for good this time. We talked about work and life. Then he said, "You seem different, Kate. You're not the same girl I met years ago." I smiled and said, "People change." He looked at me and said, "Yes, but not always for the better." His words cut deep, but I said nothing. When I went home that night, I sat by the window and looked at the city lights again. They looked the same as before, but I felt different. I had climbed higher, yes, but I was not sure I liked the view. I woke up one morning and looked around my small room. The paint on the walls was coming off. The window was still cracked. The city outside was loud as always, but something in me felt quiet. I had everything I once dreamed of: new clothes, a better job, respect from people, but I was not happy. At work, people smiled when I walked by. They said good morning and called me Miss Kate. My boss said I was doing great work. But when I went home, no one waited for me. I ate dinner alone, watched the news, and checked my phone again and again. I was busy, but I was lonely. One evening, I was invited to a company dinner. It was at a rich club in the city center. Everyone looked perfect. I sat near my boss, Mr. Allen, and some clients. They spoke about business and travel. I smiled and tried to join in, but I felt tired. When I looked around, I saw Henry at another table. He was talking with a woman in a red dress. She was beautiful and confident. I tried not to stare, but it hurt. After dinner, he came to me and said hello. I smiled politely. He said, "You look lovely tonight." I said, "Thank you." Then he asked, "Can we talk later?" I didn't answer at first, but then I said yes. When the dinner ended, we walked outside. The air was cool. The city lights shone above us. He said softly, "You're different now, Kate. You seem far away." I looked at him and said, "Maybe I am. I worked hard to get here. I can't go back." He said, "But what did you lose to come here?" His question stayed in my mind. I wanted to say nothing, but that would be a lie. I had lost warmth, peace, and maybe love. After that night, Henry tried to see me again. He called me sometimes, but I was always busy. I told myself that love would slow me down. I wanted to keep growing, but even with my progress, something felt missing. Months passed. I kept working hard. I got promoted. I now had my own desk near the window. My salary was better. I moved to a small apartment, not big but clean and quiet. I bought a few nice things, a soft bed, a mirror, a small plant near the window. I told myself I was happy. Then one day, my boss called me into his office. He said, "Kate, I'm proud of you. I want you to come with me to a meeting next week. It's important." I felt proud. The meeting was at a hotel near the airport. We went together. There were many important people there. I listened carefully and took notes. My boss smiled at me often. After the meeting, he said, "Let's have dinner here." We sat in the restaurant. He asked me about my life. I said, "I don't do much outside work." He said, "That's good. Stay focused. You're smart. You'll go far if you don't let people distract you." He looked at me for a long time, and I felt uneasy. In the weeks after that, his attitude changed. He called me more often, gave me special tasks, and stayed close when we worked. One evening, he asked me to have dinner with him again. I said no politely. He smiled but didn't look pleased. The next day, he gave one of my projects to another person. I started to feel the pressure. I realized that this world was not kind. People smiled only when you gave them what they wanted. I began to see the truth of everything I had chased. Respect from people like him was not real. It was only for use. One afternoon, I met Henry by chance again. He was sitting alone near the park. I stopped and said, "Hi." He smiled and said, "It's been a long time." I sat with him. He said he had left his company and was starting something new. He looked happier, more peaceful. He asked, "Are you happy, Kate?" I looked down and said, "I don't know. I have everything I wanted, but it doesn't feel like I thought it would." He said quietly, "Maybe you wanted the wrong things." I stayed silent. Then he said, "You wanted to be like them, but you were already better than them." We talked for a while. Before leaving, he said, "You don't need to fight so hard to be seen. The people who really see you will stay." His words stayed with me. That night, I sat by the window again. I thought about my old life, the small cafe, the noise of the coffee machine, the smell of fresh bread. It was hard, but I was kind then. I smiled more. I helped others. Now, I smiled only when I had to. I had climbed higher, but the air up here was cold. A few days later, I got a message from my boss. He said, "We need to talk. Come to my office after work." I felt nervous. When I went there, he was serious. He said, "Kate, I'm giving your position to someone else. You will move to a lower role." I was shocked. I asked why. He said, "You've changed. You seem distant, not a team player." I wanted to argue, but I didn't. I walked out quietly. I knew the real reason. I had said no to him. That night, I went home and sat in silence. I realized how fragile everything was. All the respect, the praise, the money, it could disappear in a day. For the first time in years, I cried. Not because I lost my job, but because I lost myself. I had worked so hard to be accepted by rich people who never cared about me. I forgot who I was and where I came from. The next week, I resigned. My friends at work were surprised. I told them I needed a break. I packed my things, took one last look at the office, and left. After that, I started teaching English to children in a small learning center near my home. The pay was not much, but the children were kind. They smiled when I entered the room. They said, "Good morning, Miss Kate," in small voices, and it made me happy. Sometimes, after class, I walked by the river and saw the tall buildings where I once wanted to work. I didn't hate them. I just didn't need them anymore. I had learned something the hard way. Dreams are not wrong. But when a dream costs your peace, your kindness, and your truth, it becomes a price too high. Now I still dream, but differently. I want a small, good life. I want honest work, warm people, and quiet evenings. I no longer chase people who do not see me. I still see Henry sometimes. We talk like old friends. He once said, "You look happy now." I smiled and said, "Maybe because I stopped fighting for what was never mine." He said, "That's the best kind of success." As I walked home that evening, the city lights looked softer. The air felt lighter. For the first time, I didn't feel small in this big city. I just felt free. Thank you for listening to this story. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video and subscribe.